In the quiet, forgotten corners of our world, true saints don't wear halos. They wear worn-out aprons and carry the weight of their own struggles. This is the story of Isabella Rossi. A young waitress pregnant and alone with barely enough to survive. Yet every single night after her exhausting shift, she performed a secret, selfless act of grace. With her own money and on her own tired feet, she cooked hot, nourishing meals for the children at the St. Jude's Home for Children, a place the world had all but abandoned. She asked for nothing in return, her kindness a silent prayer in the dark. But she wasn't as unseen as she thought. From the corner booth of the diner, a man was watching. A man with the power to change everything, or to destroy the one beautiful thing she had left. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a story about the fierce, stubborn power of a mother's heart, and how a single act of generosity can ignite a fire in a soul long gone cold. The air in the Greasy Spoon diner was a permanent cocktail of stale coffee, sizzling bacon and bleach. For Isabella Rossi, it was the smell of survival. At 24 and 6 months pregnant, her world had shrunk to the space between the swinging kitchen doors and the vinyl-topped counter. Her feet ached a dull, throbbing pain that radiated up her calves and settled in her lower back, a constant companion to the tiny life fluttering beneath her heart. Her uniform, a pale pink dress with a white apron, was stretched taut over her growing belly. Her boss, Sal, a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes, had started making comments. "You're slowing down, Rossi. Time is money." He never mentioned the pregnancy directly, but the implication hung in the air as thick as the grease. Isabella would just nod, her dark hair tied back in a messy bun, tendrils escaping to frame a face that was losing its youthful softness to a weary maturity. She'd lost the baby's father, Mark, a few months ago. Lost was the polite term she used. In reality, he had vanished the day she told him she was pregnant, his promises of love and a future dissolving like sugar in hot coffee. He'd taken her meager savings with him, leaving her with nothing but a broken heart and a growing responsibility. Most nights after her shift ended at 10 p.m., Isabella would count her tips. On a good night, she'd have $40. On a bad night, less than 20. After rent for her tiny, drafty apartment and the utilities, there was barely enough for food. Yet her most important expense came after her own needs were met. Instead of going straight home, she would walk 2 blocks to a small 24-hour grocery store. Her purchases were always the same, a strategic and frugal list: a bag of potatoes, a few onions, a carton of vegetable broth, a sack of lentils or beans, and whatever vegetable was on sale: carrots, celery, maybe a head of cabbage. Tonight it was a large bag of discounted carrots. The cashier, a tired-looking woman named Brenda, would often give her a pitiful look. Isabella just offered a small, determined smile in return. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up. The climb was getting harder each day. She'd pause on each landing, one hand on her belly, the other on the rickety banister, catching her breath. Inside the space was sparse but immaculate. A single bed, a small table with 2 chairs, and a kitchenette that was little more than a hot plate, a sink, and a mini-fridge. But this was where her second job began. She scrubbed the potatoes and carrots with a quiet efficiency her movements practiced and sure. The rhythmic thump-thump-thump of her knife on the worn cutting board was the only sound, a steady heartbeat in the lonely apartment. Onions sizzled on the hot plate, their sharp scent filling the small space. Soon the humble ingredients were simmering in her largest pot, a hearty, fragrant stew that smelled of home, of care, of something more than just food. While it cooked, she would sit at the small table and talk to her unborn child. "Hello in there," she'd whisper, her hand tracing circles on her stomach. "I hope you like carrots. They're good for your eyes, you know. You'll need strong eyes to see all the beauty in the world." She never spoke of her struggles of Mark or of Sal. To her baby, she offered only a world of hope and warmth. By 11:30 p.m., the stew was ready. She'd ladle it carefully into a large insulated food container she'd found at a thrift store. She also packed plastic spoons and a stack of paper bowls she bought in bulk. Then, carrying the heavy container, she would descend the 3 flights of stairs and walk half a mile through the cool, dark streets. Her destination was St. Jude's Home for Children, a grim brick building at the edge of town. It was a place most people preferred to forget a repository for the children who had fallen through the cracks. The paint was peeling. The playground was a collection of rusted metal, and the budget, as everyone knew, was perpetually stretched to its breaking point. Isabella never went to the front door. She went around to the back to a small recessed doorway that led to the kitchens. There she would be met by a single bare light bulb and the silhouette of a young boy. His name was Leo. He was maybe 10 years old, with serious eyes that seemed too old for his face. He never said much. He would just appear, open the door, and take the heavy container from her, with a strength that belied his thin frame. "Smells good, Izzy," he'd whisper. It was the only name he ever called her. "There's enough for everyone tonight, Leo. Make sure Maya gets some of the soft carrots," she'd reply, referring to his younger sister. He'd nod, and then just before he closed the door, he would sometimes offer a rare, fleeting smile. That smile was Isabella's payment. It was more valuable than all the tips in her jar. It was fuel. She would walk home, the empty container, feeling feather light in her hands, her exhaustion temporarily forgotten. She'd fall into bed, her body aching, but her heart a little less heavy, and sleep for a few precious hours before the greasy spoon beckoned again. She had no idea she had an audience. For the past 2 weeks, a man had been occupying the corner booth at the diner during the last hour of her shift. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with a face weathered by the sun and a quiet intensity in his steel-blue eyes. He dressed simply in worn jeans and a flannel shirt, but his boots were expensive leather, and the watch on his wrist was subtle but clearly high-end. He ordered black coffee and a piece of apple pie, and he sat and he watched. His name was Caleb Sterling. He owned the largest ranch in the county, a sprawling empire of cattle and land that stretched to the horizon. He was a man of immense wealth and influence, but he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to prove it. He saw the way Sal treated Isabella. He saw the fatigue etched onto her face. He saw her hand go instinctively to her belly, a gesture of both protection and love. And he saw her at the end of her shift, walking not towards the bus stop that led to the residential areas, but in the opposite direction towards the grocery store. Curiosity, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, began to stir. Tonight he decided he would do more than just watch. After paying his bill with a $100 note, a tip that made Isabella's eyes widen in disbelief, he got into his pristine Ford F-250 parked down the street and waited. He watched her go into the grocery store and then to her apartment building. An hour and a half later, he saw her emerge carrying something heavy. He followed her at a safe distance, his truck's engine a low rumble in the quiet night. He saw her destination, St. Jude's. He watched the exchange in the dim light of the back entrance, the small boy taking the container. He saw Isabella's gentle smile as she turned to leave. Caleb Sterling sat in his truck for a long time. After she was gone, the engine idling. His mind, usually occupied with cattle prices and land deeds, was now consumed by a single, nagging question. What on earth was going on? In his world, people didn't do things for nothing. Everyone had an angle, a motive. He was a cynic, made so by years of dealing with sycophants and opportunists. This quiet, selfless act didn't compute. It was an anomaly, a puzzle. And Caleb Sterling was a man who had to solve puzzles. He put the truck in gear, his brow furrowed in thought. His investigation had just begun. Caleb Sterling hadn't built his fortune by being a trusting man. He operated on a principle of verification. His initial curiosity about the pregnant waitress quickly hardened into a professional-grade suspicion. Generosity of that magnitude, especially from someone who clearly had so little, was a red flag. In his experience, it was often the prelude to a scam, a carefully constructed narrative designed to prey on the sympathies of people with deep pockets. He'd seen it before. His first step was to learn more about the players. The next afternoon he returned to the Greasy Spoon, not during Isabella's shift, but earlier. He took the same corner booth and ordered lunch. Sal was working the grill, sweat beading on his forehead. "Slow day, Sal?" Caleb asked, his voice casual. Sal looked over, wiping his hands on his dirty apron. He recognized Caleb as a good tipper. "Always is mid-afternoon. The calm before the storm. That girl who works nights. Isabella, is it?" Caleb continued, stirring his iced tea. "She a good worker?" Sal scoffed, a short, ugly sound. "She does the job. Used to be faster before she got herself in the family way." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "If you ask me, it's a sob story waiting to happen. Single mum, no good boyfriend ran off. Probably hoping some soft-hearted fool will come along and rescue her. She's not as innocent as she looks." The words landed exactly as Caleb expected. They confirmed his cynical worldview. Sal's assessment, though crude, painted a picture of a calculating woman, not a selfless saint. I see Caleb said, his expression unreadable. He finished his meal, left another generous tip to ensure Sal's continued, if unwitting, cooperation, and left. His next stop was more difficult. He drove to St. Jude's Home for Children, parking his truck across the street. The building looked even more desolate in the harsh light of day. A few older children were in the yard, listlessly kicking a scuffed soccer ball around a patch of dirt. There was no joy in their game. He didn't get out of the car. What would he even say? "Hello, I'm a wealthy rancher, and I'm investigating your secret late-night food delivery service." No. He needed information, but he had to be discreet. He decided to leverage his resources. He made a call to his lawyer in the city. "David, it's Caleb. I need you to do some digging for me." Quietly. "A woman named Isabella Rossi. I want to know everything. Credit history, past residences, any criminal record, who the father of her child is. And while you're at it, look into the financials of St. Jude's Home for Children. I want to know who runs it, where their funding comes from, and if they're in any trouble." For the rest of the week, Caleb continued his silent surveillance. He'd watch Isabella at the diner, his gaze analytical, searching for a crack in her gentle facade. He saw her wince when she bent over to pick up a dropped fork. He saw her force a smile for a rude customer who complained his coffee was cold. He saw her carefully separating her tips, putting a small portion into a separate envelope before pocketing the rest. For the ingredients, he thought a flicker of something that might have been admiration, quickly extinguished by his skepticism. Each night he followed her. The routine was unchanging. Grocery store, apartment, the hour-and-a-half wait. Then the walk to St. Jude's. the exchange with the boy Leo. One night he parked closer than usual, rolling down his window. He could hear the faint sound of children's voices from an open second-story window of the orphanage, a brief burst of laughter. Then he saw Leo emerge from the back door after Isabella had left, carrying a small bowl of the stew. The boy didn't go back inside. Instead, he sat on the cold concrete step, his shoulders hunched, and began to eat, savoring each spoonful as if it were the finest meal in the world. The image was a powerful one, and it chipped away at Caleb's certainty. Scams were usually more elaborate, more direct. This was quiet. It was consistent. It was costing her money she didn't have. What was the endgame? His lawyer called back 2 days later. Caleb, I have the information you wanted. Isabella Rossi has a clean record, not so much as a parking ticket. Her credit is shot, but that's due to a maxed-out card in her name. The charges stop about 3 months ago, right around the time her ex-boyfriend, a piece of work named Mark Renshaw, disappeared. Looks like he bled her dry and ran. Before that, she was a student at the community college studying to be a nursing assistant. Dropped out when the money ran out. Caleb processed this. It wasn't the profile of a hardened grifter. And the orphanage St. Jude's is a private institution run by a Catholic charity, the lawyer explained. The head matron is a nun, Sister Agnes. Their funding has been slashed year after year. They're operating on a shoestring. They had to cut their evening meal program down to soup and bread 6 months ago to keep the lights on. From a financial standpoint, they are teetering on the edge of insolvency. The pieces began to shift in Caleb's mind. The timing matched. The orphanage cuts its meal program. Isabella starts her nightly cooking. It was a direct response to a need, but it still didn't make sense. That evening, he was in his usual booth when a young couple with a baby came in. The baby started crying a high-pitched, insistent wail. The parents looked flustered, trying to soothe the child. Other customers shot them annoyed glances. Sal came out from the kitchen, a scowl on his face. "Hey, can you keep it down? You're disturbing my customers," he said gruffly. Isabella, who was delivering an order nearby, stopped. She turned to the young couple, her expression soft. "Is he all right? Does he need a change?" "We just changed him," the mother said. Her voice strained. "I think he's just hungry." Isabella looked at Sal, then back at the couple. She made a decision. "Come with me," she whispered, gesturing them towards the back of the diner near the kitchen doors. She warmed a bottle for them using the coffee machine's hot water spout, her movements calm and reassuring. She said something to the mother, who nodded and smiled gratefully. Within minutes, the baby was quiet, happily nursing its bottle. Isabella gave the couple a discreet thumbs up and went back to work, ignoring the thunderous look on Sal's face. Caleb watched the entire exchange. He saw no calculation in her actions. He saw empathy. He saw a maternal instinct that was as natural as breathing. He saw her risk her boss's wrath to help a stranger. He left the diner that night, feeling a deep, unfamiliar unease. His neat, cynical box was beginning to break apart. He followed her again, the routine now ingrained in his mind. He watched her go into her building, the lights of his truck's dashboard illuminating the report from his lawyer lying on the passenger seat. Clean record, bled dry by her ex, studying to be a nursing assistant. He thought of the look on Leo's face as he ate the stew on the back step. He thought of the quiet dignity with which Isabella had helped the young family. For years, Caleb's world had been one of contracts, profits, and losses. A world of black and white. Isabella Rossi was a splash of color, a variable he couldn't account for. The possibility that she was exactly what she appeared to be, a genuinely good person doing a kind thing, was in its own way more unsettling than any scam. It challenged the very foundations of the world he had built around himself to keep the memory of his own pain at bay. He now knew the what. He still didn't understand the why. And to do that, he realized he would have to do something he hadn't done in a very long time. He would have to get involved. The decision to get involved felt like stepping off a cliff. For years since his wife's death, Caleb had maintained a carefully managed distance from the world, his interactions transactional, his emotions locked away. Now this pregnant waitress was pulling him back into the messy, unpredictable realm of human connection. He decided his first move would be an indirect one, a test. The next night at the diner, instead of leaving cash, he left a gift certificate for the 24-hour grocery store on the table. The value was $500. Tucked underneath it was a simple, typewritten note for the ingredients. He didn't stay to see her reaction. He watched from his truck across the street. He saw her pick it up, her eyes widening. She looked around the diner, her gaze sweeping past his darkened vehicle without pausing. She clutched the certificate to her chest, a look of stunned disbelief on her face. Then she did something he didn't expect. She walked over to Sal, showed him the certificate, and after a brief, animated conversation, she put half the value, $250, into the communal tip jar for the other staff. Caleb felt a jolt. A grifter would have pocketed the entire amount without a second thought. But Isabella had shared her windfall. His carefully constructed wall of suspicion crumbled a little more. His next step was bolder. The following day, he drove to St. Jude's, but this time he got out of the truck and walked to the front door. The building loomed over him, a monument to neglect. He rang the bell. After a long moment, the door was opened by a stern-looking woman in a simple black habit. She had sharp, intelligent eyes that sized him up in an instant. This had to be Sister Agnes. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice firm, but not unkind. "My name is Caleb Sterling," he said. I was hoping to make a donation." Recognition flickered in her eyes. The Sterling name was well known. "We appreciate all donations, Mr. Sterling. Please come in." She led him into a small, Spartan office. The air smelled of old paper and polish. A crucifix hung on the wall above a dented metal desk. "What sort of donation did you have in mind?" she asked, folding her hands on the desk. Caleb had intended to be vague, to fish for information, but looking into the nun's steady gaze, he found himself being unexpectedly direct. "I'm interested in your meal program." Sister Agnes's expression tightened. "Our meal program is modest. Our budget doesn't allow for much, and yet your children seem to be eating well," Caleb countered gently. "I'm told they've been having some very good stew lately." The sister's eyes narrowed. "I'm not sure what you're referring to. Our kitchen provides the children with all their meals." She was protective, a gatekeeper, guarding her flock, and he now realized guarding Isabella's secret. "My wife Caleb," said the word, feeling foreign on his tongue after so long. "Her name was Eleanor. She passed away 5 years ago." A flicker of genuine warmth softened Sister Agnes's features. "I remember Eleanor Sterling, a wonderful, generous woman. She was a great friend to St. Jude's. We were so sorry to hear of her passing." Caleb hadn't known. He had left all the charity work to his wife, his focus always on the ranch, on business. He'd seen the checks being written, but he'd never paid attention to the names. Hearing his wife's name in this place, spoken with such reverence, felt like a posthumous message from her. Eleanor, she loved children. Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion he thought he'd long since buried. She always wanted to fund a proper kitchen here, a place where the kids could have real home-cooked meals every night. Sister Agnes's guard lowered completely, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. That was her dream. We talked about it often. After she was gone, well, the funding dried up. We've been trying our best ever since. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with a sudden, painful clarity. The orphanage his wife had loved was struggling. The very program she had dreamed of was being fulfilled in some small, miraculous way by a pregnant waitress who had nothing. It was as if Isabella were unknowingly channeling the spirit of his dead wife. This stew, Caleb pressed his voice softer now. It's from Isabella Rossi, isn't it? Sister. Agnes hesitated, then gave a slow, resigned nod. The girl has a heart bigger than this whole town. She shows up every night without fail. She asks for nothing. At first I was suspicious, just like you. I watched her. I saw what it cost her. But she kept coming. The children, they haven't been this happy in years. Leo, one of our boys, he calls it Izzy's magic stew. The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. He thought of his cynicism, his investigation, his suspicion of this young woman who was in her own way honoring his wife's legacy. A profound sense of shame washed over him. He cleared his throat. Sister, I'd like to see Eleanor's dream fulfilled. I want to fund that kitchen. He wrote a check from the checkbook he always carried. The amount was staggering enough to solve the orphanage's budget problems for a decade. Sister Agnes stared at the check, her eyes filling with tears. Mr. Sterling, I don't know what to say. This is a miracle. No, Caleb said, standing up. The miracle is Isabella. I'm just paying a debt. He left the orphanage a changed man. The world no longer seemed black and white. It was filled with shades of grey, but also with unexpected, brilliant flashes of light. That evening he didn't go to the diner. Instead, he drove to the street outside Isabella's apartment and waited. When she came out, carrying her heavy pot, he didn't follow. He simply watched her walk down the street, her silhouette framed by the streetlights, her pregnant form a symbol not of weakness, but of incredible strength. He now understood the why. It wasn't about a scam. It wasn't about getting something. It was about giving. Isabella cooked for those children because she understood loneliness. She fed them because she knew what it felt like to be hungry, to be forgotten. Her actions weren't a cry for help. They were an answer to someone else's. And in her quiet, stubborn generosity, she had reawakened a part of Caleb he thought had died with Eleanor. He felt a sense of purpose stir within him, a desire not just to give money, but to build, to protect, to heal. He wasn't just solving a puzzle anymore. He was becoming part of the story. But he would soon learn that the forces working against Isabella and the orphanage were far more sinister than just poverty and neglect. Caleb's donation felt like a sunrise after a long night. For a week, an unfamiliar lightness settled over him. He hired an architect to draw up plans for the Eleanor Sterling Memorial Kitchen at St. Jude's, a state-of-the-art facility that would provide nutritious meals not just for the orphans, but for underprivileged children throughout the county. He met with Sister Agnes, who was now a partner in his mission, her initial weariness replaced by an energetic optimism that made her seem years younger. He also took steps to ease Isabella's burden, though his methods remained anonymous. He arranged with the grocery store to have a weekly credit applied to her account, ensuring she would never have to pay for her ingredients again. He sent a prepaid debit card to her apartment with another typewritten note. "A good mother deserves a soft landing. Please use this for you and the baby." He still hadn't spoken to her, directly content to be a distant, unseen benefactor. He felt he owed her that space, that respect. His earlier suspicions felt like a stain he couldn't quite wash away. But storms gather fastest when the sky seems clearest. The first crack of lightning struck at St. Jude's. A registered letter arrived addressed to the board of directors. Sister Agnes opened it with trembling hands. It was a formal notice of foreclosure from the bank. The letter stated that the property's mortgage, long believed to be satisfied, was in fact heavily in arrears and was being called in. They had 60 days to pay the full amount, a sum far exceeding even Caleb's recent donation, or the property would be seized and auctioned. The news was catastrophic. Sister Agnes called Caleb, her voice choked with panic. "I don't understand, Caleb. The mortgage was paid off years ago by a benefactor." "We have the paperwork. Who was the benefactor?" Sister Caleb asked, his mind racing. It was done through a trust. The benefactor wished to remain anonymous. We never thought to question it. Caleb's blood ran cold. An anonymous trust. Shoddy paperwork. A sudden demand for payment. This wasn't a simple banking error. It reeked of predatory tactics. "Fax me everything you have," he commanded, "and don't say a word to the children." The second lightning strike hit the greasy spoon. A man walked in during the dinner rush. He was slick and handsome in a cheap way, with a practiced smile and restless eyes. He wore a leather jacket that had seen better days and an air of entitlement that immediately set Isabella's teeth on edge. It was Mark. He slid into a booth in her section, acting as if he'd just seen her yesterday. "Izzy, baby, you look bigger." He smirked. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. The tray in her hands felt suddenly heavy. "Mark, what are you doing here? Can't a guy come see his girl, his future family?" His eyes flickered down to her belly with a proprietary gleam. "Heard you were still here working for Sal. Knew I could find you. I'm not your girl, Mark." "Not anymore," she said, her voice low and shaky. She could feel the eyes of the other customers on them. Sal was watching from the kitchen, pass through a sour look on his face. "Now that's no way to talk," he said, his smile tightening. "I came back for you. For us." He leaned forward. "Look, I got into a little trouble, okay? But I'm back on my feet. I hear you've been doing all right for yourself. Coming into some money, maybe." A generous benefactor. Isabella was stunned. How could he possibly know about that? Had he been watching her? "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, turning to walk away. He grabbed her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't walk away from me, Izzy. We have things to discuss. A baby changes things. There are responsibilities. Financial ones." "Let go of me, Mark," she hissed, trying to pull her arm away. Sal chose that moment to intervene, but not in the way Isabella hoped. "Hey, take it outside, both of you. I'm not having this drama in my diner." He glared at Isabella. "And you, Rossi, you're on thin ice. This is your last warning." Shamed and terrified, Isabella wrenched her arm free and fled to the back, her heart hammering against her ribs. Mark just laughed, a low, cruel sound. He stood up, adjusted his jacket, and gave her a look that promised this was far from over before sauntering out of the diner. The rest of the shift was a nightmare. Isabella moved in a fog of anxiety, her hands trembling so badly she spilled a cup of coffee. She could feel Sal's angry glare on her back. The joy she had felt from her secret windfalls had evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. Mark wasn't back for her. He was back for the money. Her money. Her baby's money. When her shift ended, she practically ran out of the diner. She bypassed the grocery store, her stomach in knots, too sick to even think about food. All she wanted was the sanctuary of her small apartment. The city streets, usually just a familiar backdrop, now seemed menacing. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. She was so focused on looking over her shoulder that she didn't see the figure standing in the darkened doorway of her apartment building until she was almost upon him. It was Caleb Sterling. He had received the fax from Sister Agnes, and the documents had confirmed his worst fears. The trust was a shell, the signatures questionable. It was a setup. Driven by a protective instinct he hadn't felt in years, he had decided it was time to stop being a ghost. He needed to talk to Isabella, to warn her to offer his help directly. He had been waiting for nearly an hour, and in that time his worry had grown into a palpable fear for her safety. Seeing the sheer terror on her face as she approached, he knew something else was terribly wrong. "Isabella," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. She gasped, stumbling back, her hand flying to her chest. She didn't recognize him at first, seeing only another large man lurking in the shadows. "It's all right," he said quickly, stepping into the light. "My name is Caleb Sterling. I'm a friend of St. Jude's. We need to talk." Isabella stared at the man before her, her mind struggling to connect the dots. Caleb Sterling. The name was famous in the county, a synonym for wealth and power. St. Jude's. The pieces clicked together with a dizzying rush. The anonymous donations, the gift certificate, the prepaid card. It was him. He was her benefactor. But why was he here, standing in the dingy entrance of her apartment building? It was all she could manage to say, her voice a breathy whisper. "Yes," Caleb said, his expression grim. "I'm the one who's been assisting. But that's not important right now. You look terrified." What happened? The dam of her composure broke. The fear from the encounter with Mark, the shame from Sal's reprimand, the exhaustion of her pregnancy, it all came pouring out. It was Mark, she stammered, tears welling in her eyes. "My ex-boyfriend. He's back. He was at the diner. He grabbed me. He knows about the money somehow. He said he wants to be part of the baby's life. But he just wants money. I know he does." Caleb's jaw tightened, his steel blue eyes turning to ice. The thought of this leech harassing Isabella, laying claim to her and her child, ignited a cold, protective fury within him. Where is he now? I don't know. He left. But he said it wasn't over. She wrapped her arms around her belly, as if to shield her child from the world. "I don't know what to do. I can't go to the police. They'll say it's a domestic dispute. And Sal, my boss, he's going to fire me." "You are not going back to that diner," Caleb stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Your job there is finished." He looked at the crumbling plaster on the walls of the entryway, the dim, flickering light. "And you're not staying here tonight. It isn't safe." Isabella was overwhelmed. "But I have nowhere else to go." "Yes, you do," he said. "I have a guest cottage on my ranch. It's quiet, secure, No one will find you there. My housekeeper Maria can look after you. You and the baby will be safe." The offer was so immense, so far beyond the scope of her reality, that she could only stare at him. The Sterling Ranch was like a local legend, a vast private kingdom. The idea of seeking refuge there felt like stepping into another world. But the fear of Mark was more immediate, more real. The memory of his cruel grip on her wrist sent a shiver down her spine. "Okay," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and relief. "Okay." Caleb nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. "Go upstairs and pack a bag. Only what you need for a few days. Clothes, toiletries. I'll handle the rest later. I'll wait for you right here." Isabella hurried up the stairs, her mind a whirlwind. In her apartment, she moved on autopilot, throwing a few maternity dresses and essentials into a worn duffel bag. Her hands paused as they brushed against the insulated food container on her counter. She hadn't cooked tonight. The thought of Leo and the other children waiting for a meal she couldn't provide sent a sharp pang of guilt through her. When she came back downstairs, Caleb took her bag without a word and led her to his truck. The interior was clean and smelled of leather. It was a world away from the greasy spoon. As he drove, he explained the situation at the orphanage. "The foreclosure notice is a threat, but it's a calculated one," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "I have my lawyers looking into the company that holds the mortgage. It's a shell corporation, set up to obscure the real owners. Someone is deliberately trying to seize that land. But they won't get at it. I promise you that." Hearing the quiet, unshakable confidence in his voice, Isabella felt a sliver of hope. For the first time in months, she wasn't alone in her struggles. This powerful, somber man had somehow become her ally. The Sterling Ranch was breathtaking. They drove through an ornate gate and up a long, winding road flanked by miles of pristine white fences. The main house was a grand, sprawling structure of wood and stone, but Caleb drove past it towards a smaller, cozier-looking cottage nestled in a grove of oak trees. "This is it," he said, pulling to a stop. A warm light glowed in the windows. A kind-faced older woman came out to greet them. This was Maria. She took one look at Isabella's pale, exhausted face and clucked her tongue sympathetically. "Come," Mija Maria said, taking Isabella's arm gently. "You are safe now. Let's get you settled." Caleb watched them go inside before pulling out his phone. His first call was to the head of his ranch security, a formidable ex-ranger named Hank. "Hank, I need a man posted at the main gate 24/7. No one gets on this property without my direct authorization, and I want you to find someone. His name is Mark Renshaw. I have a photo and a last known address. I want to know where he is, who he's talking to, and what he had for breakfast. Be discreet." His second call was to Sal at the Greasy Spoon. Sal answered gruffly. "This is Caleb Sterling." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Mr. Sterling, what can I do for you?" "Isabella Rossi has quit. She won't be returning. I'll be sending a courier to pick up her final paycheck tomorrow. And Sal, if I ever hear that you've spoken a single bad word about her to anyone, I'll buy your diner and turn it into a parking lot. Do you understand me?" The sputtering on the other end of the line was answer enough. Caleb hung up, feeling a grim satisfaction. But his work wasn't done. The real battle was for St. Jude's. As he drove back to the main house, his mind churned over the legal documents. An anonymous trust, a shell corporation. It felt personal. It felt like an attack aimed at something precious. Later that night, Mark Renshaw, feeling confident, made his way to Isabella's apartment building. He'd given her a few hours to stew in her fear. Now it was time to apply more pressure. He was halfway up the first flight of stairs when two very large, very serious men in plain clothes stepped out of the shadows. One was Hank. Mark Renshaw. Hank asked, though it wasn't a question. Mark's bravado evaporated. "Who wants to know?" A piece of friendly advice, Hank said, his voice a low growl. "Isabella Rossi is no longer your concern. This town is no longer your concern. We've taken the liberty of purchasing a one-way bus ticket for you to Los Angeles. It leaves in 1 hour. I strongly suggest you be on it." Mark tried to bluster. "You can't." The second man took a step forward, and Mark found himself looking at a photo on the man's phone. It was a picture of him meeting with a man in a sharp suit earlier that day, a candid shot taken from across a street. "We know who you're working for," Hank said coolly. "We know they paid you to harass her. Your usefulness is at an end. If you're not on that bus, your employer will be the least of your problems. My employer is a very private man, but he is extremely protective of his friends." The message was clear. Mark was a pawn, and he was being swept off the board. Defeated and terrified, he turned and practically ran from the building. From his study in the main house, Caleb received the text from Hank. "Package is en route." He had dealt with the immediate threat to Isabella, but as he looked at the name of the law firm representing the Shell Corporation on the documents from St. Jude's, Croft, Gable, and Finch, he knew the real fight was just beginning. And the name Croft struck a deeply unpleasant chord in his memory. The name Croft echoed in the silent chambers of Caleb's memory. It belonged to his late wife's estranged brother, Julian Croft. He was a slick corporate lawyer from the city, a man Eleanor had described as having a hollow heart. She had cut ties with him years before her death over a bitter family dispute involving their parents' estate, a dispute in which Julian had shown his true avaricious colors. Caleb stared at the legal documents again. Croft, Gable, and Finch. It couldn't be a coincidence. The Shell Company trying to foreclose on St. Jude's, the one place Eleanor held most dear, was represented by her own brother's firm. A cold, sickening realization began to dawn on Caleb. This wasn't just a predatory land grab. This was a desecration. He immediately put his legal team into overdrive. "I want to know everything about this Shell Company," he told his lawyer, David. "Who are the principals? Where does the money flow? And I want you to pull every document related to Eleanor's personal trust, the one she set up for her charitable donations. I need to see who the executor was." While the lawyers dug, Caleb focused on Isabella. He saw to it that she had everything she needed. Maria fussed over her preparing nutritious meals and ensuring she was comfortable. For the first time in months, Isabella slept through the night, the profound quiet of the ranch, a balm to her frayed nerves. During the day, she would walk through the oak grove surrounding the cottage, her hand on her belly, breathing in the clean, fresh air. But her peace was tinged with worry for the children at St. Jude's. "They'll be wondering where their stew is," she told Caleb one afternoon, as they sat on the porch of the guest cottage. "Sister Agnes has explained that you're unwell and need to rest," Caleb reassured her, "and the new kitchen plans are already underway. Thanks to you, they'll have home-cooked meals every night forever." The scale of his generosity still stunned her. "I don't understand why you're doing all this," she confessed, looking at his weathered profile. Caleb was silent for a long moment, watching the cattle graze in a distant pasture. "My wife Eleanor, this place, these children, they were her passion," he said, his voice low. After she died, I closed myself off from the parts of the world she loved. It was too painful. You, Isabella, with your pot of stew, you reminded me of her spirit. You reminded me of what's important. You didn't just feed those children. You woke me up. It was the most he had ever revealed about himself, and the raw honesty of it forged a new, deeper connection between them. The call from his lawyer came 2 days later. David's voice was grim. "Caleb, it's worse than we thought. The executor of Eleanor's private trust was her brother Julian Croft." Caleb's knuckles turned white as he gripped the phone. "Go on." The trust was set up with a substantial endowment specifically to pay off and maintain the St. Jude's property in perpetuity. But Julian never paid it off. Instead, he used the trust funds to buy the mortgage himself, transferring it to the Shell Corporation, which, you guessed it, he secretly controls. For years, he's been paying the mortgage to himself, with Eleanor's money draining the trust. Now that the funds have been fully embezzled, he's foreclosing, intending to seize the land, demolish the orphanage, and sell it to commercial developers. He's been planning it for years. The betrayal was monstrous. Julian Croft had not only stolen his own sister's money, but he had systematically engineered the destruction of her most cherished legacy, all for profit. The anonymous benefactor who was supposed to have saved St. Jude's was the very man now trying to bury it. A wave of pure, cold rage washed over Caleb. This was no longer business. This was personal. He would not just stop Julian, he would ruin him. As this dark revelation settled, another crisis was unfolding. The stress of the past week, the confrontation with Mark, the fear for her safety, the emotional upheaval had taken its toll on Isabella. She was in the cottage kitchen helping Maria shell peas when a sharp, cramping pain seized her abdomen. She gasped, dropping the bowl. "Maria." She breathed, her face pale with alarm. I think the baby is coming." Maria, ever calm in a crisis, helped her to a chair. "It is too soon, mija. You are not due for many weeks." But another wave of pain, stronger this time, made Isabella cry out. Maria knew this was no false alarm. She immediately called Caleb at the main house. "Caleb, it is Isabella. The baby. It is coming now. It is too early." Caleb's heart stopped. He abandoned his phone call with the lawyer and sprinted out of his study. He was at the guest cottage in minutes, his mind a blur of fear. He saw Isabella, her face etched with pain, but also with a fierce determination. "We have to get you to the hospital," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "The main hospital is 40 minutes away. The local clinic is closer but not equipped for a premature birth." The main hospital, Isabella gasped, gripping his hand. "They have a neonatal unit. Please." He scooped her up into his arms as gently as he could, surprised at how light she felt. He carried her to his truck, Maria following with the duffel bag Isabella had packed days earlier. The drive was a tense, agonizing eternity. Caleb drove with focused speed, his eyes fixed on the road, while Maria sat in the back with Isabella, murmuring soothing words in Spanish and coaching her through the contractions. Isabella's thoughts were a chaotic prayer. "Please let my baby be okay. Please be strong. Please be healthy." She clung to Caleb's hand, his solid, calloused grip a lifeline in a sea of pain and fear. They screeched to a halt at the emergency entrance of the county hospital. A team of nurses was waiting, alerted by Caleb's frantic phone call from the road. They whisked Isabella away on a gurney, her worried eyes searching for his as she disappeared through the double doors. Caleb was left standing in the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway, his heart pounding. He, a man who controlled a vast empire, who could move markets and command men, was utterly powerless. All he could do was wait. He sank into a plastic chair, the scent of antiseptic filling his nostrils, and for the first time in 5 years, he prayed. He prayed for the young woman who had reminded him how to feel, and for the tiny, fragile life she was fighting so hard to bring into the world. The minutes in the hospital waiting room felt like a lifetime. Caleb, a man accustomed to control, was utterly helpless pacing the sterile floors while Isabella fought for her child's life. The earlier rage toward Julian Croft was gone, replaced by a singular consuming fear. Finally, a doctor appeared. "Mr. Sterling, mother and daughter are both doing well. We have a beautiful, albeit very small, baby girl. She's in the NICU as a precaution, but her vitals are strong." Relief washed over Caleb so intensely his knees felt weak. A daughter. While Isabella rested, he stepped outside and with a new steely resolve unleashed his lawyers. He ordered an injunction against Croft's firm, a meeting with the district attorney, to prosecute Julian to the fullest extent of the law, and the immediate purchase of the St. Jude's mortgage. The threat was over. When he saw Isabella, she was exhausted, but radiant. "Thank you, Caleb," she whispered, her eyes full of gratitude. "You saved us." "You saved me, Isabella," he corrected her quietly. A nurse led them to the NICU. Peering through the glass at the tiniest human he had ever seen, Caleb felt an overwhelming wave of protectiveness. "Have you thought of a name?" he asked. Isabella looked from her daughter to Caleb. "Yes," she said softly. "I want to name her Eleanor." Caleb was floored, unable to speak as he squeezed her hand. A legacy of kindness passed from one Eleanor to another. In the weeks that followed, a new world took shape. Julian Croft's betrayal was exposed, his career ending in disgrace and federal charges, the deed to St. Jude's was now secure, its future guaranteed. Isabella and baby Eleanor came home not to the guest cottage, but to the main ranch house, filling the once silent halls with life and laughter. One sunny afternoon, Caleb found Isabella on the veranda rocking her daughter. "I'm establishing a foundation in my wife's name to run the new kitchen at St. Jude's," he said, his voice earnest. "It needs a director, someone who understands that food is love. The job is yours, Isabella. A real job with a salary, a house, and a future for you and little Eleanor if you want it." Tears of pure joy streamed down Isabella's face. A life of security, a testament to the fact that her quiet acts of kindness had built a future from a simple pot of stew. "Yes, Caleb," she whispered. "Yes, I want it." A true smile spread across Caleb's face, erasing the last shadows of his grief. In this resilient young woman and her precious child, he had found a new reason to build, to hope, and to live. Together they would build a foundation, not of stone, but of a generous spirit. And so the story of Isabella Rossi and Caleb Sterling wasn't a fairy tale ending, but a real-life beginning. It wasn't about a wealthy rancher saving a damsel in distress. It was about two people, both broken in their own ways, who found healing and purpose by looking beyond their own pain to help others. It proves that the most powerful forces on earth are not wealth or influence, but the stubborn resilience of a mother's love and the transformative power of a generous heart. Isabella's simple act of cooking a meal became the catalyst that saved a home, honored a legacy, and built a future. If this story of hope, courage, and the incredible impact of a single act of kindness touched your heart, please help us share it. Like this video, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring true-life dramas, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that there is still so much good in the world. What small act of kindness can you perform today? You never know whose life you might change.